Have you ever noticed how often people complain? We complain about our jobs, we complain about our leaders, we complain about our partners, our friends, even the traffic. And sometimes we complain about the very things we've been tolerating for months, even years. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can't complain about what you allow. If you keep accepting it, if you keep permitting it, you don't get to be shocked when it happens again. Think about it. Every time you allow someone to treat you poorly, you're giving them permission to keep doing it. Every time you stay silent when something bothers you, you're teaching people that your silence means agreement. And then, ironically, you turn around and complain about it. That's the contradiction we often live in. Complaints are easy. Accountability is hard. The reason accountability feels so difficult is because it always starts with us. It's much easier to point the finger at other people. It's much easier to say, they should be better. They should respect me. They should understand. But the reality is, people only treat us the way we allow them to. The standard you set for yourself is the standard the world learns to follow. If you always answer work emails at midnight, don't be surprised when your boss expects you to reply at midnight. If you always let your friend cancel last minute without saying a word, don't be shocked when they keep canceling. If you let someone speak over you in every meeting, don't complain when your voice isn't being heard. We train people how to treat us. Not with one big speech, but with what we consistently allow. Here's the paradox of complaining. We use it as a release valve. Complaining feels good in the moment because it gives us an outlet for frustration. But if nothing changes after the complaint, it's just noise. It doesn't move us forward. It doesn't create solutions. It doesn't reset boundaries. All it does is reinforce the cycle. So here's a question worth asking yourself. Am I actually upset at what's happening, or am I upset at myself for allowing it to happen again? That's a tough question because it forces us to look in the mirror. And when we do, we realize silence isn't neutral. Silence is permission. Silence tells the other person, it's fine, keep going. Do it again. And before we know it, we've built an environment that we don't even like living in, but one we helped create. Let me tell you a story. There was once a team leader who was frustrated that his employees never showed initiative. He complained constantly, they never bring me ideas. They never take risks. They just sit there and wait for me to tell them what to do. One day, someone asked him, what happens when they make a mistake? He answered, I correct them immediately. I tell them exactly what they should have done. And there it was. He had trained his team not to take risks. He allowed no space for error, no room for initiative, no tolerance for experiments. And then he complained about the very culture he allowed. This is not about blame. It's about awareness. Because the moment we recognize that we are allowing something, we also recognize that we can disallow it. And that's where change begins. Boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are clarity. They are the markers that say, this is okay and this is not okay. People often resist setting boundaries because they fear being seen as rude, selfish, or difficult. But boundaries are not selfish, they are leadership. They are the way we show others how to respect us, how to collaborate with us, and how to grow with us. Imagine if leaders and organizations never set boundaries, if deadlines didn't exist, if standards weren't clear, if values weren't enforced, chaos would reign. Yet in our personal lives, we sometimes run without boundaries and then wonder why chaos follows us there. Here's the pattern. When you avoid discomfort now, you choose complaints later. When you choose courage now, you prevent complaints later. That means every time you don't speak up, you're making an investment, not in peace, but in future frustration. You're choosing to delay the conflict, which only grows heavier over time. The hard conversation avoided today becomes the repeated complaint tomorrow. The truth is, complaining is comfortable. Confrontation is uncomfortable. And so we choose comfort in the moment, only to live with discomfort in the long run. But think about the people you admire most. They're not the ones who complain the loudest. They're the ones who hold the highest standards. They're the ones who say, no, that's not okay. They're the ones who draw a line, not to push people away, but to protect what matters. The courage to stop allowing something is the first step toward change. You don't even need to start with the world. You start with yourself. What habits are you allowing that you later complain about? The snooze button you hit every morning. The scrolling through your phone that steals hours of your time. The unhealthy food choices you know make you feel worse. We complain about our lack of energy, our lack of focus, our lack of progress. But we are allowing the very behaviors that drain us. So the principle is universal. You can't complain about what you allow, whether it's how people treat you, how teams behave, or how you live your own life. Complaining without changing what you allow is just repeating the same cycle. Now here's the good news. If you allowed it, you can disallow it. If you tolerated it, you can set a new standard. If you stayed silent, you can choose to speak. And the moment you do, you shift the entire dynamic. Change won't always be welcomed. When you first stop allowing something, people might resist. They may even push back harder because they're used to the old pattern. That's normal. but hold the line. Because once they see you mean it, they'll adjust. They'll learn the new boundary, the new standard, the new expectation. And here's the beautiful part: when you stop complaining and start leading with clear standards, people actually respect you more. They may not thank you right away, but deep down, they admire those who are clear, those who have the courage to say what they stand for and what they won't tolerate. The ripple effect is powerful. When you set boundaries, you give permission to others to set theirs. When you stop complaining and start changing, you inspire others to do the same. You show them that courage is contagious. So the challenge is this: look at the areas of your life where you've been complaining. Ask yourself, what am I allowing here? And then make a decision. Either stop allowing it or stop complaining about it, because you can't have both. You can't complain about being overworked if you never say no. You can't complain about being overlooked if you never speak up. You can't complain about being disrespected if you never demand respect. You can't complain about the culture you're living in if you are actively permitting it to exist. We all have a choice: complaining or changing, comfort or courage, silence or standards. Complaining doesn't cost anything in the short term, but in the long run it costs everything. It costs peace, respect, progress, and growth. But courage, while costly in the short term, pays dividends forever. So the next time you find yourself complaining, stop and ask, am I allowing this? And if I am I willing to stop allowing it? Because the moment you decide you will no longer allow it, you'll find you have a lot less to complain about. You can't complain about what you allow, but you can change what you allow. And that's where true growth begins. There's a sentence that seems simple on the surface, but the more you think about it, the more it challenges the way we live our lives. You can't complain about what you allow. When I first heard that idea, it stopped me, because I realized how much of what frustrates us every day is the very thing we've been quietly permitting. We complain about how people treat us, but we never tell them it's not okay. We complain about being overworked, but we never say no. We complain about being unappreciated, but we never set the expectation that our contribution matters. And then we scratch our heads, wondering why nothing changes. It's not because people are cruel. It's not because the world is unfair. It's because what we allow becomes the standard. And when the standard is set, people follow it, whether we like it or not. Think of it this way. If you walked into a friend's home and every time you left your shoes on, they said nothing, you'd assume it's acceptable. But if the very first time you did it, they asked kindly, hey, would you mind leaving your shoes at the door? You'd never forget. You'd know the boundary, and you'd respect it. Why? Because clarity creates behavior. But silence creates assumption. And assumption almost never works in our favor. We love to believe people should just know better. That our boss should know we don't want to answer emails at midnight. That our partner should know we're hurt when they cancel plans last minute. That our colleagues should know we don't like being spoken over in meetings. But here's the thing, people don't know unless we tell them. And when we don't tell them, we're still teaching them. Because silence is teaching too. Silence is permission. The more you think about it, the more you realize complaining is actually a form of procrastination. It feels like action, but it isn't. Complaining lets us release some of the pressure, but it doesn't fix the problem. It's like having a leaky pipe in your house. You complain every day about the dripping sound, but until you grab the wrench or call the plumber, the leak continues. Complaining only makes the room louder, it doesn't stop the water. And yet so many of us live our lives like this. We fill the air with complaints, hoping the world will magically adjust, but the world rarely adjusts to words, it adjusts to boundaries. There was once a manager who constantly complained about her team's lack of initiative. She'd say, they never think for themselves, they never step up. I have to tell them everything. But when you dug deeper, you learned that every time someone tried something new, she corrected them immediately. Every time they took a small risk, she reminded them of the proper way to do it. And over time, her team learned it was safer not to try. What she allowed was dependence. What she created was frustration. And her complaints were simply echoes of her own permission. This happens everywhere in our families, in our friendships, in our workplaces, and even in the way we treat ourselves. How many of us complain about our lack of energy while allowing ourselves to stay up past midnight scrolling through a phone? How many of us complain about our lack of time while allowing ourselves to say yes to things that drain us instead of the things that matter? How many of us complain about the way our lives feel while allowing the very habits that keep us stuck? It's confronting, because it shifts the responsibility back to us. And responsibility isn't always comfortable. It's far easier to say, they need to change, than it is to admit, I need to stop allowing this. But here's the paradox. The moment we stop allowing it, the complaining stops too. Setting boundaries feels intimidating. We fear conflict. We fear rejection. We fear people will see us as selfish or difficult. But boundaries aren't selfish. They're signals. They say, here's what I stand for, here's what I value, here's the respect I expect from myself and the respect I'm willing to give you. Boundaries are clarity, and clarity is kindness. Without boundaries, frustration festers. With boundaries, respect grows. The hard part isn't knowing this, it's doing it. Because doing it means stepping into discomfort. It means having the difficult conversation. It means risking someone else's temporary disappointment in order to prevent your long-term resentment. That's the trade-off. Either we feel a few minutes of awkwardness now, or we live with years of frustration later. Complaining buys short-term relief, but guarantees long-term dissatisfaction. Courage costs in the short term, but pays dividends forever. There's a saying, what you tolerate, you endorse. You may not like it, but if you keep tolerating it, you're part of its continuation. And that's true at every level. It's true in personal relationships. It's true in workplace culture. It's true in society. When enough people stop allowing something, change becomes inevitable. But when everyone complains while allowing, nothing happens. Complaining without action is the world's favorite form of self-deception. Think about the leaders you admire most. Are they the ones who complain the loudest? Or are they the ones who set the clearest standards? True leaders aren't those who bark about how things should be. They're the ones who refuse to allow what doesn't align with their values. They take action. They draw the line. They make it clear what's acceptable and what isn't. And in doing so, they inspire others to rise to that standard. The same principle applies in our personal lives. We teach people how to treat us. Not with one grand declaration, but with every small allowance. Every time you accept being interrupted, you train others that your voice can wait. Every time you let disrespect slide, you teach others that respect is optional. Every time you say yes when you wanted to say no, you show others your boundaries are negotiable. And then, when the frustration builds, we call it unfair. But really, we've been complicit. So what do? We start by getting honest with ourselves. What have I been complaining about most? And what am I allowing that keeps this problem alive? If I complain about exhaustion, am I allowing poor sleep habits? If I complain about feeling stuck, am I allowing fear to stop me from taking risks? If I complain about being overlooked, am I allowing myself to remain silent when I should speak? The answer is rarely out there. It's usually in here. The second step is courage. Not dramatic courage, the small kind. The courage to say, no, I can't take that on right now. The courage to say, it bothers me when you cancel last minute. The courage to tell your boss, I won't be checking emails after 7 p.m. The courage to put your phone down and go to bed. These are not world-shaking acts of bravery, but they are life-shaping ones. And here's what happens when you start doing this. At first, people may resist. They'll test your new boundary because they're used to the old one. They'll push against it, they'll challenge it. But if you hold steady, calm, consistent, clear, they'll adapt, because humans always adapt to new standards once they're enforced. The surprising part, when people know where you stand, they respect you more. They may not like it in the moment, but deep down, clarity feels safer than ambiguity. People trust those who are consistent. People follow those who know where their line is. And over time, your courage inspires others to draw their own lines. This is how culture shifts, not through endless complaints, but through courageous clarity. So the challenge I leave you with today is this: the next time you catch yourself complaining, stop. Ask yourself, am I allowing this? And if the answer is yes, then you have two options. Either stop allowing it or stop complaining about it, because you can't have both. If you don't want to be overworked, set limits. If you don't want to be disrespected, speak up. If you don't want to be ignored, claim your space. If you don't want to feel drained, stop tolerating what drains you. It may not be easy, but it will always be worth it. Remember this: complaints change nothing. Boundaries change everything. Complaints create noise. Boundaries create respect. Complaints let the problem linger. Boundaries give birth to solutions. You can't complain about what you allow, but you can choose to stop allowing. And when you do, you'll discover that much of what frustrates you begins to fade away. Not because the world got easier, but because you got clearer. And clarity, more than anything, is what sets us free. There's a phrase that, once you let it sink in, changes the way you look at your life. You can't complain about what you allow. Think about how much time we spend complaining. We complain about our leaders, our jobs, our families, our friends, even about ourselves. We talk about how unfair things are, how overwhelming life feels, how others treat us. And yet often, when you peel back the layers, you see something sobering. The very thing we're complaining about is the very thing we've been tolerating all along. The truth is, every time you allow something to happen without saying or doing anything about it, you've just given it permission to exist. And the more permission you give, the more permanent it becomes. Take a simple example. Imagine someone consistently shows up late when meeting you. At first, you let it slide. You tell yourself it's just a one-time thing. The next time, they're late again. You roll your eyes, but you say nothing. After a while, they don't even try to be on time. And suddenly you find yourself complaining to other people about how this friend doesn't respect your time. But here's the hard part: you trained them. By allowing it, you taught them that your time was flexible, negotiable, maybe even unimportant. It's the same at work. If you're always the one who stays late to finish what others didn't, you may think you're helping. But if you complain later that you're the only one carrying the load, you need to remember you allowed it. By not speaking up, by not setting the boundary, by not saying no, you taught everyone that you'll always pick up the slack. And it's not just about people, it's about yourself. How often do we complain about our own lives while allowing habits that undermine us? We complain about being tired, but we allow ourselves to binge watch until 2 a.m. We complain about being unproductive, but we allow hours to slip away scrolling on our phones. We complain about not reaching our goals, but we allow fear and procrastination to keep us from starting. We forget that silence is not neutral. Silence is consent. Silence says, this is fine, keep doing it. And then months later, when we're overwhelmed and exhausted, we turn to complaints as if that somehow balances the equation. But it doesn't. Complaints are a symptom. Allowance is the cause. There was a leader I once observed who constantly complained about his team being disengaged. He'd say things like, no one here cares, no one goes the extra mile, and yet every time someone offered an idea, he shot it down with criticism. Every time someone tried to take initiative, he corrected them harshly. Over time, his team stopped trying, they stopped caring. And there he was, still complaining about a culture that he had personally allowed and even created. This is the human blind spot. We often don't realize how much of what frustrates us is simply the natural consequence of our own tolerance. What we tolerate doesn't just stay, it multiplies. And that's why complaints without action are powerless. They're nothing more than stories we tell ourselves to feel momentarily justified. Complaining makes us the victim. It places the responsibility elsewhere. But action, setting boundaries, saying no, speaking up, that puts responsibility back where it belongs, with us. And responsibility is scary, because if I admit I allowed it, then I also have to admit I have the power to stop it. And that's a lot harder than complaining. But think about this: every standard you live with is one you've either set or accepted. People don't automatically know how to treat you, they learn. They learn from how you respond, from what you let slide, from what you tolerate. If you never push back, they'll assume it's fine. If you never speak up, they'll assume you're okay with it. And over time, you build a life full of things you never really wanted, but also never refused. We tell ourselves stories to justify it. I don't want to cause conflict. It's not that big of a deal. Maybe they'll change on their own. But deep down, we know what's happening. Every time we choose not to act, we're choosing to allow. And every time we allow, we give up the right to complain. It doesn't mean you need to fight every battle. It doesn't mean you become confrontational or rigid. It means you choose courage over comfort. It means you have the hard conversation instead of holding on to quiet resentment. It means you trade the temporary discomfort of speaking up for the long-term peace of living by your values. Because that's what boundaries are. They're not punishments, they're not walls. Boundaries are clarity. They say, this is what matters to me. This is how I expect to be treated. This is how I will respect you and how I expect you to respect me. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're leadership. They don't push people away. They teach people how to move closer without harm. And yes, at first, people will resist. They're used to the old rules. They'll test the new ones. They might even accuse you of changing. But that's because you have changed. You've stopped allowing what was never acceptable in the first place. And when you hold your ground, when you stay consistent, they adapt. Because humans adapt to the standards we enforce. And here's the part we don't talk about enough: the more consistent your boundaries, the less you'll need to enforce them. People respect clarity. Once they know where the line is, they stop crossing it. This principle doesn't just apply to individuals. It applies to cultures, organizations, and societies. Look at any toxic workplace, and you'll find it wasn't built in a day. It was built over years of small allowances, one disrespectful comment ignored, one bad leader left unchecked, one compromise on values justified. And before long, people are complaining about the culture. But the culture is simply a reflection of what was allowed. And the opposite is also true. Look at thriving organizations, healthy teams, strong communities. They're not built on constant complaining about what's wrong. They're built on people willing to say, this is what we will not allow here. They're built on courage. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a choice. Every complaint is an invitation. It's asking you, am I willing to keep allowing this, or am I ready to set a new standard? If you're not ready to stop allowing it, then complaining is just noise. But if you are ready, then every complaint can become a catalyst for change. Maybe for you it starts small, saying no to one more project you don't have time for. Speaking up once in a meeting when you'd normally stay silent. Telling someone kindly, but firmly, that's not okay with me. Or even deciding for yourself, I won't keep living this way. Because the moment you stop allowing it, you stop needing to complain about it. The moment you shift from tolerating to leading, the problem begins to shrink. And here's the beautiful thing: when you do this, you inspire others to do the same. People see your courage, and it gives them permission to find theirs. People see your clarity, and it makes them want to be clearer too. Courage is contagious. Clarity is magnetic. So let me leave you with this. The next time you feel a complaint rising in your throat, pause. Don't just ask, why is this happening? Ask, what am I allowing? And then make the choice. Either stop allowing it or stop complaining about it. Because you cannot have it both ways. You can't complain about being exhausted if you keep saying yes to everything. You can't complain about being overlooked if you never step forward. You can't complain about being disrespected if you never demand respect. You can't complain about the culture around you if you quietly go along with it. The truth is, complaining will drain you, but courage will free you. Complaints trap you in the same cycle. Courage breaks the cycle. Complaints make you the victim. Courage makes you the leader. You can't complain about what you allow, but you can stop allowing, and when you do, you'll find you no longer need to complain because your life begins to reflect the standards you finally had the courage to set. You can't complain about what you allow. At first, it sounds like just a clever phrase, something you might read on a poster or see online. But when you sit with it, when you let it sink in, it challenges you. Because it forces you to face something uncomfortable. Most of the things we complain about are things we've permitted for far too long. We all complain. We complain about our jobs. We complain about the people we work with. We complain about our families, our friends, our leaders. Even about ourselves, we complain about being tired, about being overlooked, about being unappreciated. And yet, if we're honest, many of those complaints point back to something we've allowed to continue. Think about it. If you complain that people don't respect your time, but you keep showing up whenever they ask, what message are you sending? If you complain about being overwhelmed, but you keep saying yes to everything, what role are you playing? If you complain about how someone treats you, but you never tell them it's unacceptable, what have you taught them? The truth is simple. Even if it's uncomfortable, what we allow, we endorse. Not verbally, not consciously, but practically. By letting it happen, by staying quiet, by avoiding the hard conversation, we send the signal that it's okay. And once something is seen as okay, it continues. Silence is not neutral. Silence is permission. Every time we choose silence instead of clarity, we make a trade. We buy temporary peace at the cost of long-term frustration. And later, when the frustration piles up, we vent through complaints. But those complaints don't solve anything. They just echo in the room, leaving the cycle intact. Let me share a story. There was a man who used to complain endlessly about how his team didn't respect him. They ignored deadlines. They pushed back on his instructions. They rolled their eyes when he spoke. He'd tell anyone who would listen about how unfair it was. But when you looked closer, you saw the pattern. The first time they missed a deadline, he stayed late to cover for them. The first time they ignored an instruction, he let it slide because he didn't want conflict. The first time they rolled their eyes, he laughed it off as a joke. And so, little by little, he trained them that disrespect was acceptable. What he complained about later was the culture he had allowed from the beginning. This is not about blame. It's not about beating ourselves up for the times we stayed quiet. It's about awareness. Because the moment we see that we've allowed something, we also see that we can stop allowing it. And that realization is powerful. Complaining is easy. Changing is hard. Complaining lets us feel like victims. Changing requires us to take responsibility. Complaining makes noise. Changing makes impact. And change always begins with a boundary. Boundaries are not about building walls. They're about drawing lines. They say, this is what I value. This is what matters. This is how I expect to be treated and how I will treat you in return. Boundaries are not selfish. They're acts of respect for yourself and for others. Because when people know your boundaries, they know how to engage with you in a healthy way. Yet we resist setting boundaries because we fear how people will react. We worry they'll be upset. We worry they'll see us differently. We worry they'll leave. But here's the paradox. When we set no boundaries, we don't avoid conflict. We just postpone it. And when the conflict finally arrives, it's bigger, heavier, and messier. Complaining without action is like standing in the rain and cursing the storm. You can yell all you want, but the rain will keep falling until you move, until you find shelter, until you act. And the same is true in life. We can complain about being unappreciated at work, but until we speak up, until we advocate for ourselves, nothing changes. We can complain about a toxic relationship, but until we set the boundary or walk away, nothing changes. We can complain about our lack of energy, but until we change our habits, nothing changes. Complaints don't change the weather. Choices do. What you allow is what you live with, and what you live with becomes your reality. It doesn't just happen in our personal lives. It happens in organizations. Think about any workplace culture you've seen that turn toxic. It didn't happen overnight. It started small, one inappropriate joke ignored, one instance of bad behavior excused, one leader's arrogance tolerated. And slowly, those small allowances grew into a culture no one wanted, yet everyone complained about. But the culture wasn't an accident. It was built on silence, on permission, on a series of allowances. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine a culture where people say, that's not acceptable here. Imagine a team where someone speaks up the first time disrespect shows up. Imagine a workplace where the values aren't just written on the wall, but enforced in the hall. That culture isn't born of complaints. It's born of courage. Courage is the antidote to complaint. Because courage steps in where complaining stalls. Courage is the willingness to say, I won't allow this anymore. And that moment, that decision, is the moment things begin to change. Here's the beautiful thing: once you stop allowing it, the need to complain disappears. Once you set the boundary, the frustration fades. Once you find your courage, you don't just stop the behavior, you stop the cycle. But here's the catch. The moment you stop allowing it, you will face resistance. People are used to the old rules. They'll test the new ones, they'll question you. They might even accuse you of being different, and they're right, you are different. You've grown. You've decided to value yourself enough to draw the line. And while they may resist at first, consistency wins. People may push against boundaries, but they ultimately respect them because boundaries create clarity and clarity creates trust. And that trust spreads. The moment you set boundaries in your life, you give others permission to do the same. The moment you stop complaining and start acting, you show others that it's possible. Courage is contagious. So ask yourself, what are you complaining about most right now? And then ask the harder question, what am I allowing that keeps this problem alive? That's the question that shifts everything. Because once you name what you've been allowing, you face a choice. You can either stop allowing it or stop complaining about it. If you complain about being exhausted, but you keep saying yes to everything, then your choice is clear. If you complain about being ignored, but you keep staying silent, your choice is clear. If you complain about being disrespected, but you keep letting it slide, your choice is clear. Complaining without change is self-sabotage. The moment you decide you will no longer allow it, you regain control. And with control comes peace, with control comes respect, with control comes growth. So the challenge is simple, but not easy. The next time you find yourself ready to complain, pause. Ask yourself, what am I allowing? And then decide, am I willing to keep allowing it or am I ready to stop? Because once you stop allowing it, you stop needing to complain. Once you stop tolerating what drains you, you start creating what fuels you. Once you stop being silent, you start being heard. You can't complain about what you allow, but you can stop allowing. And when you do, you'll find you don't just have less to complain about, you have more to celebrate. Because your life, your work, your relationships will finally reflect the standards you've had the courage to set. You can't complain about what you allow. It's a confronting statement. Because most of us, if we're honest, are experts at complaining. We complain about the traffic. We complain about our boss. We complain about our partner, our kids, our friends. We complain about politics, about the weather, about our own bad habits. And yet beneath every one of those complaints, there's a pattern. So much of what frustrates us is something we've been permitting silently or passively all along. Think about the last time you caught yourself frustrated. Maybe it was with a colleague who always interrupts you in meetings. Maybe it was with a family member who constantly takes advantage of your generosity. Maybe it was with yourself, watching yet another week go by without you doing the thing you said mattered most. We're quick to complain. But the question we often avoid asking is this: what did I allow that made this possible? The uncomfortable truth is that silence is permission. Inaction is permission. Every time you don't speak up, every time you let something slide, every time you convince yourself it's not worth the conflict, you're making a choice. You're choosing to allow it. And if you allow it, you can't complain about it. This is why complaining feels so unsatisfying. It lets us release a little steam, but it doesn't change anything. It tricks us into thinking we've done something because we've voiced our frustration, but the reality is nothing has shifted. The person who disrespected you doesn't even know you're upset. The habit you're frustrated with hasn't been interrupted. The culture you dislike keeps moving forward. Complaining is noise without consequence. But action, that's where things change. And action always starts with accountability. Accountability to ourselves first. The moment you say, I allowed this, you move from victim to participant. And once you see yourself as a participant, you also see that you have the power to change the rules of participation. I once heard the story of a young professional who hated how much her manager micromanaged her. She complained constantly about how suffocating it felt, how she never got to make decisions on her own. But when someone asked her, what do you do when he steps in? Her answer was telling. I let him, she said. It's easier that way. She allowed it. She trained her manager to believe she needed his constant oversight. And then she complained about the very environment she helped to create. We do this more often than we realize. It's the friend who never respects your time. And you keep saying, it's fine. It's the coworker who dumps last-minute tasks on you, and you always accept them. It's the habit you hate in yourself, but you never interrupt. Over time, these little allowances accumulate until one day you look at your life, your work, your relationships, and you feel frustrated, drained, unappreciated. And the temptation is to blame everyone else. But often, we don't need to point the finger outward. We need to look inward at what we've been permitting, what you allow you teach. You teach people how to treat you not with one big speech, but with the boundaries you enforce or fail to enforce every single day. And the more you allow, the less room there is for respect. The paradox is that we avoid boundaries because we think they'll push people away. We think saying no will cost us relationships. We think speaking up will make us unlikable. We think setting standards will alienate others. But the truth is the opposite. Boundaries don't push people away. They teach people how to move closer without harm. Boundaries create respect. Boundaries show others what matters to us. Boundaries make relationships stronger, not weaker. Look at leaders who inspire you. They don't complain about everything that frustrates them. They set standards, they draw lines. They say, this is what we value here. This is what we will not accept. And people follow them because they admire clarity. People respect consistency. Complaints don't create culture. Boundaries do. Now, here's the part no one likes to talk about. The moment you stop allowing something, there will be pushback. People who benefited from the old rules won't like the new ones. The colleague who always relied on you to cover for them won't be thrilled when you say no. The friend who always cancels plans won't know what to do when you finally tell them it hurts you. The boss who always got late, night responses won't applaud when you stop checking your email after dinner. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. But discomfort is the price of change, and here's the good news: people adjust. Once they realize your boundary is real, once they see you're consistent, they adapt. And when they adapt, respect begins to grow. The very thing you feared, losing relationships, rarely happens. What actually happens is that relationships become healthier, work becomes more sustainable, life becomes clearer. But it starts with courage. Courage to admit, I've been allowing this. Courage to say, I'm not going to anymore. Courage to hold the line even when it feels awkward or inconvenient. Complaining is easy. Courage is hard. Complaining is comfortable. Courage is uncomfortable. But if you want a life with fewer complaints, you can't avoid the discomfort. You have to embrace it. And let's not forget, it's not just about other people. Some of the hardest complaints we live with are about ourselves. We complain about being stuck, but we allow fear to hold us back. We complain about being unmotivated, but we allow distractions to fill our days. We complain about being unhealthy, but we allow the habits that keep us there. It's the same principle. You can't complain about what you allow in yourself either. This is why accountability is powerful. Because once you say, I've been allowing this, you're free to make a different choice. If you allowed poor habits, you can choose better ones. If you allowed fear, you can choose courage. If you allowed silence, you can choose to speak. You can't rewrite the past, but you can reset the standard. And when you do, something incredible happens. Your complaints decrease, not because the world got easier, but because you got clearer. You stopped tolerating what didn't belong. You stopped giving permission where it wasn't deserved. And in doing so, you reclaimed your energy, your respect, your peace. So ask yourself, what are you complaining about most right now? Is it your job, your relationships, your time, your health? Whatever it is, look closer. What are you allowing that makes this problem possible? And once you've named it, make a choice. Either stop allowing it or stop complaining about it, because you cannot have both. You can't complain about being overworked if you keep saying yes. You can't complain about being unappreciated if you never speak up. You can't complain about being overlooked if you never step forward. You can't complain about being stuck if you never move. The choice is always ours. We either accept it and stay silent, or we set a new standard and change it. Complaints keep us trapped. Boundaries set us free. The world doesn't change because of what we complain about. It changes because of what we refuse to allow. So the next time you feel that familiar frustration rising, pause. Ask yourself, am I allowing this? And if the answer is yes, then the real question is, am I ready to stop? Because you can't complain about what you allow, but you can always choose to stop allowing it. And that choice, the choice to act with clarity, to set a standard, to lead with courage, that's the choice that transforms everything.